Welcome, tale tellers and night wanderers. You have found your way to the hour where the world stops pretending to sleep, where streetlights hum a little too evenly, and the air smells like rain that's been underground for far too long. Tonight, we're going to a small town, one that doesn't even show up on most maps anymore. We'll walk its quiet streets, step over the holes that drink light, and listen very carefully for the whistle that comes at exactly 3 a.m. It's not just a sound, it's an invitation, and once you hear it, you can't help but follow it. This is the Town of Mouths. I woke up at 3 a.m., not from a dream, not from thirst, not from anything I could name. My eyes simply opened, the ceiling hovering above me in a weak dim that wasn't quite darkness. There was no wind outside. The digital clock on my nightstand glowed 3 a.m. exactly, cold and steady, no blink when it came. 3 notes. Not a melody, not a song, just 3 ascending notes, each as perfect as if they'd been tuned against something flawless. No reverb, no direction. They didn't travel through air. They arrived. They were in the room with me, in my ears, behind my eyes, lodged like a thought I hadn't chosen to think. I sat up before I realized I was sitting up. The sound had already ended. The house was so still, I could hear the grain in the wood of my desk cooling, the tick-tick of it settling. Outside my window, the sodium streetlight pulled pale amber over the curb. A single moth drifted lazily through it, its wings casting quick shadows over the asphalt. I waited for something else, more notes, a shuffle of movement. Nothing came. The longer I listened, the more the night seemed like a held breath. My own heartbeat was the only motion. I lay back down, kept my eyes open until 4 a.m., and finally fell asleep. When I woke again, sunlight striped my room through the blinds, and the whistle might have been a trick my brain played in the blurred hour between sleeping and waking. I didn't tell my parents at breakfast. The thought of describing it felt wrong. Not because they wouldn't believe me, but because putting it into words might root it in something I didn't want growing. The day went by in its usual shape. School, chatter, I didn't really track. The lazy scraping of chairs on linoleum. My head throbbed behind the eyes, a slow pulse. After the final bell, I took the long route home, the one that curved past the old gutter drain halfway down Alder Street. It was there I saw it. A hole. Perfectly circular, maybe the width of my palm, carved into the metal grate itself. No ragged edges, no corrosion. Clean. Too clean. So clean, it seemed to refuse the rust around it. And it wasn't just dark inside. It was absence. Even with the sun at my back, the light didn't touch the inside edges. I leaned close enough to feel the faintest cold slip out, like the breath of something deep. A car passed behind me, and I jerked back. When I glanced down again, a black coin of rainwater, maybe from some unseen branch above, fell toward the hole. It didn't splash, didn't ripple. It was there, then gone, swallowed without a sound. I walked home fast, and when my mum asked how school was, I said fine, because the truth didn't have the right shape for words yet. That night I made sure my window was latched. I remembered the squeal of the lock turning, the little jump it made under my fingers. The streetlight, though, poured the same amber glow through the glass, haloing the moths again. I lay in bed watching my breath fog the lower pane until sleep dragged me down. It was the whistle that brought me up again. 3 notes, same pitch, same space between them. 3 a.m. exactly. I counted the seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, until I reached 60. Then I started again. Nothing else happened. Still, I couldn't stop the counting. My own breath began to match the rhythm. I lost track of how many times I reached 60. By morning, my teeth ached from clenching. The third night, I didn't need the clock. I woke at 2:59 a.m., staring at the ceiling in the dim. My body was already waiting. The whistle came on time, cutting the night into 3 perfect pieces. This time, I didn't count afterward. I just lay there, knowing something in me was starting to adjust. It wasn't an interruption anymore. It was part of the night, and that felt worse. The whistle had trained me. By the 4th night, I wasn't waking because of it. I was waking for it. Something in my chest seemed to roll over at 2:59, bracing for that 3-note arrival. It wasn't even a surprise anymore, just the same sterile delivery, 3 tones, precise as a machine with no echo, no drift, no source. I had started keeping the blinds half open, like maybe I'd catch something moving outside in the moment after. But there was never anything. Just the amber streetlight, the moths, and the faint silver outline of the gutter drain at the curb. Morning didn't feel real anymore. Everything had the thinned-out texture of a photograph you've stared at for too long. The faces, the sidewalks, the breakfast cereal sliding into the bowl. My parents' voices had started to sound less like conversation and more like recordings playing from a room away. After school, I went back to Alder Street gutter. The hole was still there, perfectly intact, as if the weather didn't touch it. The rust around it seemed even more pronounced now, though, like the metal had aged decades in just 2 days. But the hole itself was still young, still clean, still swallowing every hint of light. That's when I saw another one. It was in the park, under the frame of the old swing set, bored into the packed dirt, right at the place your feet dig in when you slow yourself down. Not wide, maybe an inch across, but the same impossible geometry. Not drilled, not dug, a perfect absence. I crouched low, and before I could lean in closer, a stray dog padded into view from behind the slide. Mud matted its fur, eyes dulled like whetstones. It came right to the hole and stood over it, ears angled forward, as if it were listening for something far below. I stayed very still. Its head tilted once, slowly. Then it turned and walked away without glancing at me. When I came back the next day, that hole was gone. Not filled in, gone. The dirt was untouched, no sign it had been disturbed. I started looking for them deliberately. There was one in the concrete rim of the culvert near the edge of town. The water trickling through there smelled like cold pennies and wet leaves. This hole sat just above the waterline, cut into the curve of the cement, and when I dropped a pebble in, it didn't clatter or splash. It made a sound I couldn't place. A tiny click, the kind you feel in your teeth when you bite a fork too hard. I walked home with that sound stuck in my jaw. At dinner, my dad chewed with his eyes down, which wasn't unusual. But my mum was the one who broke the silence, asking if I'd heard about the testing. I didn't know what she meant. She said some people thought the dig-out of the outskirts was for soil contamination or water checks. She said the papers didn't mention much, but someone at the store said men in white suits had been seen at the site. I didn't tell them about the holes. The holes didn't feel like something you offered up in casual conversation. The 5th night, I heard the whistle from above, not louder, just closer, as if it had learned the acoustics of my street. 3 notes, a pause, 3 notes again. The space between them was considerate, almost polite, like someone waiting for me to finish a thought before continuing. I lay there with the covers pulled to my chin, counting the beats between each set. I lost track somewhere in the 30s. That night, though, I dreamed of standing on the culvert lip, the black hole below me breathing in time with my own lungs. When I woke, my mouth tasted faintly metallic. I decided to start a list, not just mental, a real one. I drew the town from memory on notebook paper and marked the gutter, the park, the culvert. I left space for more, because there would be more. I knew that now. By the time I'd marked 5 holes on the map, I had stopped expecting the town to move the way it used to. It wasn't just me waking for the whistle anymore. It was the way the days felt like they'd been ironed flat, stripped of texture. The way people's eyes would linger a fraction too long, as if they were waiting for me to break some silence I hadn't noticed who had entered. The first real change happened in the library. I'd gone there to check old town maps, thinking maybe the holes lined up with something buried or forgotten. Pipes, old survey markers, anything. Mrs. Hall, the librarian, had been at her usual spot behind the desk, a stack of returns beside her. She was smiling, but it didn't sit right on her face. The curve of her mouth was an 1/8 inch too low, like someone had painted it there, and the skin hadn't caught up yet. When I stepped closer to hand her a book, I saw her pause. Not in the usual way you expect to see texture up close, but arranged in a faint grid. Each one an identical dark pinprick. My fingers twitched to touch my own face just to confirm I hadn't been repatterned without noticing. I left without getting the maps. On the bus the next morning, the driver kept glancing at me in the overhead mirror, but not all at once. His gaze lagged, mirror shifting a beat after his actual head turned, like the reflection was reluctant to keep up. By then, new holes had appeared indoors. One was in the linoleum just inside the school's supply closet. I spotted it when I was putting away a box of chalk that crumbled in my hand, like it was tired of holding itself together. The hole looked identical to the outdoor ones, perfect, silent, swallowing light. I used the tip of a pencil to prod at the edge. The wood met resistance, just for a second, then slid in a 1/4 inch. The sound it made coming back out wasn't wood on air, it was wood on something smooth and slick, like the point had brushed the roof of a mouth. That night, there was one in our kitchen, right where the baseboard met the wall by the refrigerator. My parents didn't mention it. They just stepped over it when they needed something from the fridge. I didn't test that one. The whistle came earlier, 2:57 a.m. I woke already staring at my door. The sound was closer again, resonating with a new depth, as if the notes were brushing the wood of the frame. After it ended, I heard footsteps in the hallway, soft, measured, not sneaking. There was no attempt to mask them, but deliberate, each step pausing just long enough for me to count. They stopped at my bedroom door. I waited for a knock. Instead, something slid under, not in any physical way. The door didn't move, no light seeped through, but in sound. It wasn't language. My brain knew that immediately, but it also wasn't random noise. The wet murmur had its own inner rhythm, like the sound you hear in the first moment after going underwater. Your heartbeat and the distant churn of something bigger. The door seemed to lean into it. The grain of the wood felt aware. I kept my breath shallow until it stopped. The next day, I took the long way home to pass the outskirts dig. You could hear it before you saw it, machinery idling with a dull, constant groan. But when I reached the chain link fence, most of the equipment sat still. The sky above was heavy with drizzle, flattening the clay into streaks. Someone had scrawled, "It sings," in black marker across the foreman's shack door. The letters were thick, but the ink had bled in the damp, making the words look like they'd sunk into the wood grain. I ducked low to peer through a gap in the fence and saw the first lines, etched into the clay itself, not carved but baked black, crisp against the soil. They ran straight for several feet before bending sharply to meet other lines, forming points. I didn't see the full shape, but I could feel its symmetry from where I stood. By the time I got home, there was a figure across the street, standing still on the sidewalk, under the streetlight. They were facing me. Even from that distance, I could tell their mouth was wrong, too wide. The shape of it pulled toward the edges of their jaw, and behind the lips too many teeth, small, curved, packed in like kernels on a cob. I didn't run. Not because I wasn't afraid. Because running would have been an answer, and whatever was out there didn't feel like it was done asking. By the time I got to 9 marks on my map, I wasn't sleeping between whistles anymore. I just lie there, half propped against the headboard, watching the streetlight's halo bend around the moths, feeling the house creak in slow, careful stretches, like it didn't want to wake anyone. My body had the same drained heaviness you get after a fever, like my bones were full of lukewarm water. But my mind wouldn't stop ticking. I wasn't scared in a panicked way anymore. It was quieter than that, like sitting at a bus stop with a stranger who keeps glancing at you. The holes were starting to show up in clusters. The culvert had 3 now, different heights, along the cement wall, each one perfectly spaced from the others. If you drew lines between them, you'd get a triangle that felt too clean for coincidence, a geometry that sat wrong in the gut. I stood there one afternoon in the drizzle, my breath curling out of me like steam, tracing the shape in my head. The water below kept its cold metal smell. I thought about how my mum used to rinse blood off kitchen knives under the tap, how that same faint tang would hang in the air afterward. And I realized the smell here wasn't water at all. It was the holes. I was testing this theory later, walking home past the park, when I noticed someone had drawn a chalk circle around one of them. Just regular white sidewalk chalk, a little faded from rain. The circle was lopsided, edges jittery, like whoever made it had tried hard to be neat, but their hand wouldn't stay steady. The hole inside the chalk didn't seem to notice or care. It just sat there, black as ever. When I bent closer, I saw faint scratches on the asphalt radiating out from the rim, like something had pressed its way up, then smoothed the edges afterward. That night, I did something I hadn't done before. I tried to record the whistle, not with a phone. My phone microphone always made things sound like they were underwater. I used paper. I sat up in the bed with the pencil, ready to mark every note as it came. Just a dash for each one. The whistle came at 2:55 this time, the earliest yet. 3 notes, pause, 3 notes, pause, over and over, patient as breathing. I kept marking, dash by dash, until the page was crowded with them. When I looked at it in the morning, the dashes weren't random. They'd arced into a circle. The kitchen hole was still there, but now there was a second one, right in my bedroom wall, a few inches above the baseboard. It hadn't been there when I'd gone to bed. My map was starting to feel like a clock face, each hole another tick towards something I couldn't see. I went back to the outskirts that afternoon. The dig was quiet, no machinery running, just a faint hum in the air that wasn't electrical. The chain link fence rattled gently in the wind, and I realized the wind was the wrong temperature, warm, like someone had just exhaled in my face. I found a way in through a cut section near the rear. Clay clung to my sneakers as I picked my way down into the pit. The etched lines were everywhere now, deep and black, as if they'd been cauterized into the earth. They didn't wander, they moved with purpose, always meeting at points that bit into my eyes if I tried to focus too long. From the higher ground, you could almost see it. Not the whole thing, but enough. 5 points, a geometry the size of the town itself. At the very center, a mound of clay rose like a blister. The soil around it flexed faintly, as if it were breathing. In the foreman's shack, maps were pinned to the wall. They weren't like my map. They didn't show streets or landmarks, just the lines, just the points. Someone had scrawled in the corner. It sings in the same bleeding marker I'd seen before. The worst part was realizing that my map, my careful little drawing of Alder Street and the park at the culvert, fit perfectly over theirs. There, the holes were lining up with the points. The whistle that night came before I was even in bed. I sat at my desk, map spread in front of me, pencil in hand, and listened as the notes drifted through the walls. The pattern wasn't just in the dirt now, it was in me. And whatever was breathing under that clay blister was starting to breathe through me too. I knew I had to go back. I didn't notice the first change in Mrs. Cantor until I saw her in the yard behind the post office. She was kneeling in the wet soil, both hands sunk past the wrists. Her shoulders moved in a slow pull, like she was drawing something up from deep down. But there was nothing in her hands. When she finally lifted them, nothing except the way the skin along her wrists was wrong. It looked swollen at first, but it wasn't. Her wrists had ridges under the skin, parallel plates running crosswise, like the ribbing inside a seashell. When she pulled her hands free, the dirt didn't just fall away. It clung in clumps, as if reluctant to leave her. The skin, where it did fall, was pale and smooth. Very smooth, with a faint sheen of wet muscle underneath. She flexed her fingers and the ridges flexed too, as though they were part of some deeper joint I shouldn't be able to see. She looked up at me then, and her smile sat wrong, tilted, as if her mouth had been put back on in a hurry. Her eyes didn't blink in the same rhythm anymore. I walked away, and my shoes made a damp sucking sound in the mud that matched her breathing. By the end of the week, the changes weren't just hers. I saw them in school first. Ryan Kepler in gym class, jogging slow laps while a pale seam had opened along the side of his neck. It wasn't a wound, there was no blood, but a slit, lined with thin flaps of tissue that fluttered open with each breath. From across the gym, I could hear it, a soft, wet chuff. Then Miss Hall at the library, leaning across the counter to hand me a book. I saw the pits along her temple, each one perfectly round, arranged in a circle the size of a coin. They weren't pores anymore. They were deeper, dark enough to lose sight in. I could smell her from that distance, a faint iron tang mixed with the rot sweet smell of wet leaves. In the hallway between classes, people started smiling in ways that pulled at the skin until their lips split at the corners. Inside, where the lips parted, the teeth were small, curved, and too numerous, like rows of white fish hooks set into pink flesh. It got harder to breathe in the school's air. It was humid like a greenhouse, the kind of damp that makes your hair stick to your forehead, but under it was something heavier, slaughterhouse humidity, that clinging density of fluids that should stay inside things. The whistle was no longer just at night. I'd catch it faintly in the middle of the day. 3 notes curling through the air vents, so soft I had to hold my breath to be sure I'd heard them. Each time I'd catch someone nearby pause mid-step, head tilting slightly toward the sound. The 5th night after the blister, I awoke not to the whistle, but to a wet, dragging sound in my room. I didn't move at first, just let my eyes adjust to the faint street-like glow slipping in through the blinds. There was the shape near the foot of my bed, stooped low, moving with the slow deliberation of someone pulling a heavy sack across the floor. The air was thick with that soil and iron smell, but under it was something sharper, like raw fish left in the sun. The knot language came again, but now it had rhythm. Short, wet syllables repeated like a chant, and over it, a sound I recognized only after a moment. Breathing. Not human breathing. Too many inlets and outlets. Too many moving parts, like air being sifted through vents and flaps before reaching lungs. I closed my eyes and stayed still until the sound moved toward the wall, toward the new hole by the baseboard. I didn't see it leave, I just knew it was gone. In the morning, I found my mother at the kitchen table. She was chewing soil. Not dry dirt, black, wet soil, the kind that clings to your fingertips and stains the lines of your palms. It coated her teeth, the extra rows now visible even when her mouth was shut. Her eyes caught light in a way that never had before. Flat, wet, like the surface of a pond in shade. She looked up at me without stopping. By midday, it wasn't just her. People on the sidewalk moved with the same slow, deliberate rhythm, as if waiting for some internal signal before taking each step. Faces were pitted now, some shallow like insect bites, some deeper, ringed with raw skin. A few had chitinous plates budding under their skin, pale at first but darkening toward a sick brown red. Even the town itself was catching it. Metal lampposts had holes bored into them, same perfect circles. Park benches, truck fenders, the siding of houses, all sprouting those black mouths that drank light and gave nothing back. And the smell, it clung to everything. Not just iron and rot anymore, but a low-level fermentation, like something wet and alive was working its way through the air itself. My clothes smelled like it after 10 minutes outside. I stopped adding to the map that day, not because I didn't care where the holes were, but because the map wasn't a map anymore. It was a countdown, and I could feel we were almost out of time. By the time I finally set out for the outskirts, the whole town had started breathing. Not in the normal unconscious way, I mean the streets themselves. I walked past houses with shutters drawn and no lights outside, but you could feel the pulse in the pavement, soft like someone pressing from below with the flat of their palm. Every few seconds it would sink back, then press again, as if the ground and the air had decided to share one set of lungs. The holes were bigger now, not just palm size, but wide enough to swallow my shoe if I stepped wrong. Some had grown into each other, forming clean-edged ovals that felt deliberate, like stepping stones laid out for someone who didn't walk the way we do. The sound around them was thinner, stripped of background noise, like the air was going deaf when it got too close. I passed a fence on Marlowe Street that had been politely ruined. That's the phrase that came to me. Slats removed with surgical neatness, no splintering, no nails bent, as if the wood had simply agreed to stop being part of a fence. Beyond it, the grass was dotted with shallow holes that moved faintly, as if tasting the air. The sky was low and heavy when I reached the dig. From a distance, it looked abandoned, but up close, you could see the marks, the black etching crisp through clay, running in converging lines towards the center mound. But it was no mound, really. The more I thought about it, it was more like a dome. Up close, the clay wasn't solid. It flexed, the surface tightening and relaxing in a rhythm just shy of my own heartbeat. Fluids beaded along faint seams and rolled down into the etched lines, darkening them to an oily black. The air was wet enough to cling to my lips and make my teeth ache. The sound was worse than the smell, a low, constant chuffing, not from any one point, but rising from every marked line, every little aperture in the dirt. It wasn't random. It had timing. I moved toward a half-collapsed pump house near the edge of the pit, hoping for a high vantage. Inside, the walls were stained with black arcs, spiraling down into a stone shaft. The stone was scored with the same etchings, and here the holes were everywhere, packed so tight in rings that the stone itself seemed more whole than surface. At the bottom of the shaft was a plate. It was black, smooth, and perfectly round, the edge ringed with lace-like apertures that fluttered in and out as if sniffing. I didn't have to touch it to know it was aware of me. The flutter slowed, shifted. The rhythm changed. I could feel my own heat being measured. Beside the shaft, papers had been nailed to the wall in a frantic mess. Maps, diagrams, and a single line scrawled in thick pencil. They dug wrong the first time. We buried it wrong. Outside, movement was gathering. They were coming down the access roads in groups of 5. My father was among them. His shirt hung loose over a back that seemed broader than it used to be. Vents had opened along his ribs, soft flaps that pulsed open and shut. His face was lined with new seams, each one shining faintly, as though stitched with something alive. Every group of 5 took a position around the dome, evenly spaced, perfectly aligned with the pentagram I traced on my own map. The vent breathing synchronized, filling the air with a steady, almost musical exhalation. The dome swelled under the sound, pushing up against its own clay skin until it was drum tight. Then the not language began. It rolled out every altered mouth at once, a thick, wet choir, syllables bending in ways the ear didn't want to follow. The lace aperture around the plate in the shaft tightened like pupils, and I swear the dome shivered in reply. It was opening. The surface flexed and split along one seam, just enough for something inside to push against it from below. The rhythm in the air faltered. Whatever it was, it needed more time, more force, more something. Then, as if on cue, it stopped. The dome eased back, the seams sealing shut with a soft, sucking sound. The crowd didn't disperse. They stood there, breathing, waiting for the next signal. I, left with the map burned into my mind, the center point marked in dark, deliberate strokes. I knew I'd be back, because whatever was under that plate wasn't done, and neither was I. When I woke up the next morning, the whistle wasn't there, but I don't know how I got here, in my bed. That should have been a relief though, but lying there in the dim grey, I realized silence could be worse. I strained for it, the way you do when a fridge hum cuts out and you suddenly notice how loud the absence is. My own heartbeat filled the room in little bursts. Somewhere under it, the house made slow, deliberate adjustments, timbers expanding with a sound like dry knuckles being cracked. I got dressed without turning out the lights. The streets were wrong before I even reached the corner. There were no cars, no buses, no chatter from the porch radios, or the low clink of someone bringing in the trash can, just things left behind. Half-folded laundry on a stoop, a shopping cart parked in the middle of an intersection with eggs still inside, their shells damp from the morning air. A coat lay in the gutter with both sleeves stretched out like arms mid-fall, and the holes, they'd grown. Some were broad enough to show a faint concavity inside, like the rim of a well that had no bottom. Others had merged into pits, the edges so smooth they might have been carved with a lathe. A lamppost had toppled, and the metal where it had snapped was pitted through with the same round mouths. My stomach kept tightening, warning me to turn back, but I couldn't. I saw the first person on Broad Street, if you could call them a person anymore. It was the mailman, Mr. Thomas, but his shirt was split along the shoulders where thick, translucent plates bulged under the skin, each ridged and faintly veined. The flesh around them were glossy and raw, as though it had been stretched too far too fast. His arms hung too low now, sleeves flapping at the wrists and the hands. The fingers had split at the first knuckle, branching into smaller digits, each tipped with a wet keratin hook. He flexed them in little rippling sequences like a pianist warming up. I stepped back into a doorway, pressing against the cold glass. He turned his head toward me, not fast, but with the same awful precision as the whistle. His jaw had widened, the corners pulled toward his ears, exposing triple rows of those small hooked teeth. The gums were black and slick. He didn't come toward me, just tilted his head. Vents along his neck fluttered in perfect rhythm, and then he walked toward the outskirts. Everyone I saw was moving that way, 5 by 5 down the middle of the streets, all facing the same direction as before. Their new features varied. Vents, plates, split lips, the circular pits that burrowed deeper into faces, but all of them shared the same calm, clockwork gait. They didn't look at each other, didn't speak. The closer I got to the library, the more holes there were. Sidewalks, door frames, even the spines of books in the display window, each one punctured clean through, lightless. Inside, the air was thick and still. I went to the back table and spread my maps. The pentagram points were obvious now. My marks matched them exactly. The clusters of holes at each point were the densest in town. The center was the blister, the dome. Something shook the shelves. At first, I thought it was an earthquake, but it was slower than that. A rolling motion that came from below. The whistle followed, not in its usual 3-note shape, but stretched out this time. Bloated until it had the size of a train horn. The sound hit my ribs before it hit my ears. A seam split open in the library floor, no wider than a finger. But it ran in a perfect straight line from one wall to the other. The carpet's edge curled back, the padding underneath puckering and shrinking, as if the hole's darkness was sucking the color out of it. I jumped back just in time before it widened into a perfect circle. I left the library at a run, map clutched tight. Outside, the crowd was still moving toward the dig. The sky above them was dimming, as though the streetlight halos were fading even in daylight. I could hear the vents in their bodies chuffing in unison, each breath sharpening the rhythm I'd first felt in the dome. I knew then the center wasn't just where they were going, it was calling to them. And if I wanted to understand what was going on, if I wanted to stop it, or even just survive it, there was only one place left to go. And tomorrow, I'd be there. And whatever was under that dome would know me. The whistle didn't come at all that night. I lay in the dark waiting for it. Stomach knotted, the silence heavy enough to press on my chest. It wasn't that I'd gotten used to the sound, God, no. But after so many nights, its absence felt like a missing heartbeat. Again, I didn't know how I got back in my bed. I got out of bed around 2. The air was warm, still, with a faint wet smell of turned soil and iron. My parents' room was empty, the bed covers thrown back, damp with sweat that wasn't theirs anymore. The outside, the streets weren't empty. They were expectant. I could feel it in the way the air pressed against my face, the way the moths moved in perfect circles under the streetlights. The houses hunched inward, siding warped around new holes like wood swirling around rot. The dome was waiting for me. The walk out, though, took less than I thought it would. No traffic, no stops, just the slow pull of the pattern under my feet. The map was unnecessary now. I could feel the lines in the dirt, etched like scars beneath the asphalt. When I reached the fence, the crowd was already in position, 5 by 5, encircling the mound, their heads all tilted slightly toward the center, vents breathing in synchrony. Chitin plates flexing under the skin that had given up pretending to be human. The dome itself was larger now. The clay had thinned to a grey membrane, taut enough to reflect the faint light from the sky. Beneath it, something shifted, slow, deliberate, the way you'd move under a thin blanket so it didn't tear. I stepped through the gap in the fence. The moment my foot hit the dirt inside the perimeter, the vents changed rhythm. Not just a breath anymore, an intake, as if every altered body around the dome had smelled me at once. I walked to the shaft, where I'd seen the plate before. The air pouring out of it was hot and wet, tasting of metal filings and blood that had cooled to room temperature. The lace-like apertures around the plate were open wide now, pulsing faintly. When I leaned closer, the plate breathed in time with me. For one heartbeat, I thought I saw my reflection in it. But it wasn't a reflection, it was me. Split and changed, teeth like curved hooks, vents spiraling along my jawline. My eyes were wide and flat, reflecting nothing at all. I stumbled back, but the image didn't vanish. The lace ring tightened. The membrane of the dome flexed hard from inside. Something vast pressed against it, distorting its perfect curve. The crowd moaned in that wet, wordless, not language, and the sound hit me in the knees. The plate pulsed once, twice, then shifted. I heard stone grinding far below, and from the hole nearest my feet, something reached. The thing that came out wasn't a hand. It was a length of pale, slick muscle, ridged with tiny breathing vents that fluttered like gills as it tasted the air. The tip split open along a wet seam, and inside were teeth, dozens, small and perfect, arranged in a spiral that went deeper than it should have. It didn't grab me. It touched my ankle like it was checking my pulse. Then it withdrew, sliding back into the hole with a patient, deliberate grace. The plate pulsed once more, and the lace apertures all focused on me. The crowd's vents hissed in unison. Somewhere deep below, the whistle came. But this time it was only one note, and I knew, with a kind of certainty that feels like a memory, that the next two would come from me. Well, listeners, if you've stayed with me this far, maybe you've already started listening differently. Maybe you've noticed how quiet your house is right now. Or maybe you've heard something threading through that quiet. A rhythm you didn't ask for, 3 notes. If you do, don't bother checking the window. You won't see anything. Just wait. Let it finish. Because if you interrupt it, well, the town I told you about, try that once. And now there's nothing left of it at all. A massive thank you to you, the listener, for listening. And now, I want to thank my amazing, jaw-dropping supporters. My amazing legend of a pal and supporter is my own Night Tea Titan, Matto Star, one of the key guardians keeping this journey alive. In the town I've been telling you about, there aren't many people you can trust once the holes start to appear. But Matto's the kind of person you'd find sitting by the last working street lamp, pouring tea that smells of smoke and something older, keeping watch long enough to make sure you get home without the whistle following you. In stories like this, that kind of presence is rare, and in life, is invaluable. So Matto Star, my Ode Night Tea Titan and friend, thank you for being here in the dark with me, and for making sure the path is lit, at least until the next note calls us back. Matto, you are a superstar and an absolute jaw-dropping legend. Have yourself a fantastic week ahead. Be safe, and thank you as always for being my friend. What a godsend you are. And now to my white tea warlords. First up is Lesosaurus Rex. Lesosaurus is the only one in this town who still walks to the gym at 3 a.m., even when the whistle's calling. While the rest of us hide, they're getting stronger, so when something finally climbs out of those holes, it might just regret meeting Lesosaurus Rex in the dark. Leza, have an awesome gym session. Thank you for being such an amazing pal and supporter, and have a great week ahead, legend. Thank you so much. And now I want to say my thank yous to Maya, the Queen of Cats. In this town, the cats always know when the whistle's coming. They vanish before it hits the third note. But Maya, she walks with them. They follow her in a silent procession, tails high, eyes bright as coins at the bottom of a dark well. When the holes appear, the cats circle them, ears flat, while Maya just smiles, as if she already knows what's inside. If the rest of us vanish one night, I'm sure she'll still be here, cats at her heels, keeping the new rulers of the town company. Thank you, Maya, for being an amazing supporter as well. My white tea warlord and pal. Have a great week ahead of you, and thank you for your support. And my final white tea warlord is Sangeetha Sagar. In this town, most people can't see what's coming until it's standing at their door. But Sangeetha watches the lines, etched in the dirt, carved in the walls, curling through our dreams. She knows which hole will open next and who it's meant for. The crowd might follow the whistle without question, but she's already 3 steps ahead, eyes fixed on something far, far below. When the dome finally opens, I think she'll be the only one who won't be surprised by what climbs out. Thank you, Sangeetha, for your awesome support. And have yourself a brilliant week ahead. Thank you again. A huge thank you to my own Night Tea Titan and White Tea Warlords once more. Absolute superstars, all of you. Thank you so much. You do more than just keep the lights pumping. You keep the stories coming and polished. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now it's time to thank my Earl Grey enforcers and all those tiers thereafter. I am lucky enough to have Chad Warren, Divided by Zero, Juicebox Andy, Joss Heather, Paige Kramer, Peter Raffaelli, Seductive Smiles, Jane Gumnick, and Michael Krupp. Thank you so much for supporting me and keeping this podcast bubbling along. And legendary listeners, if you're still here listening and want to support the show, check out my Patreon, where you get access to episodes 1 week early, high quality audio, and early Patreon posts at www.patreon.com/SFGT. Thank you so much. Have an epic week ahead of yourselves. And I'll see you next time the whistle comes.
In the quiet street light glow, where the moss drifts slow and low, there's a sound only some can hear.